All right, I think fans may be going a little far with this one, if I'm being honest about it. The idea that the Las Vegas Aces are ducking the Indy smoke, it comes because the Aces have made a lineup decision in the final game of the season to really not play their starters. I mean, this Seattle Storm account says the Las Vegas Aces say they prefer to face the Seattle Storm over the Indiana Fever in the first round. Vegas will rest their star players and forego a chance to be the third seed. As you can see, unlikely going to see Chelsea Gray, Kelsey Plum, Asia Wilson, Jackie Young, the U.S. Olympians for the Las Vegas Aces in the final game of the season, which of course led to some trash talk from Fever fans and others on the internet as well. You can see this comment right here. A team with 5 Olympians ducking a rookie in the playoffs, laughing emojis all over the place. I honestly don't think that's the case. I think, I would probably do the same thing if I was Las Vegas. They can't lose home court advantage in the first round. So the chips will fall where they may. You want to be healthy and 100% going into the playoffs. And the turnaround to the playoffs is actually rather quick. So Christy Sides is faced with a similar decision with the Fever. We haven't seen any indication that they're going to be resting as of yet. And there's also the dilemma when you coach Caitlin Clark that the road fans are paying their hard-earned money to see Caitlin Clark play basketball. The arenas change and all that sort of stuff. So there's that aspect you have to balance. But if I am Sides, I am certainly limiting the minutes for my best players against the Mystics in the final game of the season to make sure that they are 100% and not gassed for the postseason as well. As far as the specific matchups go, I mean, it's hard to say the Aces would be afraid of the Fever given they've beaten them every time they played them this season, right? In fact, it would go the other way around. If you're a Fever fan, I think you'd much rather see Connecticut head-to-head because the Sun don't really have the scoring ability to strike fear into the Fever. With that said, as much as I think Connecticut is the better matchup for Indiana, there is something, worth salivating over if you consider the possibility of the Fever meeting the Aces in the first round. 22-2s, Asia Wilson against Caitlin Clark. And that would be one of the craziest stories ever if the Fever were able to upset the Aces, the back-to-back defending champs, and Clark was able to send Wilson home. But there hasn't been an indication that Indiana is good enough to do that in the head-to-head matchups with Las Vegas, who seem to be rounding into form coming into the postseason. The Aces know defensively how to guard Clark better than most teams. The Aces obviously have talented personnel, and the Aces also get a bit of a favorable whistle, I would say. A bit of a favorable whistle. So I think fans are reading too much into that a bit, but it will be exciting to see how the chips fall for the playoffs. Clark had actually spoken on this, and, she said more or less it would be crazy to have a preference who the playoff opponent is. So that is the way that Clark thinks. That's the competitor inner. Here is actually the footage of that comment from practice the other day. Here's what Clark said about it.
I mean, I don't have a preference, no. I think that would be kind of crazy. I just think, wherever we go. You prep the same exact way as you would prep for anybody else. Same way you prepped all season long. Obviously, there's a little more on the line, but, it's basically going to be new for every single person in our franchise, minus a few players, and obviously maybe a few coaches. So I think just continue to prep the way we have. Whoever we get, and you're happy about it. You're happy to be there, and then you believe you can compete against them.
And Clark's going to have a chip on her shoulder. She's going to be ready to compete. She probably believes she can lead the Fever to a championship this year. I think the Fever, obviously, we've talked about this, are ahead of schedule, right? Like, I don't think anybody thought Indiana would, one, even be in the playoffs when you take into consideration the beginning of the season, and number two, even be in consideration for winning a playoff series or, hell, the ceiling. I'm not putting a ceiling on Indiana. I think they can be eliminated in the first round, but there's nothing they could do that would surprise me. My concerns are the same as they have been. The power forward position. Nalissa Smith is way too erratic for my tastes. Not good enough defensively. she really scares me basically every time she's out on the floor there. So that is one of the factors that you have to consider when you're looking at the possible outcomes in the playoffs. I don't think the Fever have been good enough defensively at times when you're looking at the postseason. But offensively, they are potent enough. They are potent enough against anyone. When you combine what Clark is able to do as an orchestrator and as an engine, and you pair her up with Kelsey Mitchell in the backcourt and what she's able to do as a pure scorer, and you throw in Aaliyah Boston, who is a screener, a roller, a playmaker herself in the short roll, has nice touch around the basket. I mean, that is, I think Becky Hammond said it herself, a three-headed monster. That's a three-headed monster for the Fever, which gives them a chance against anybody. Lexi Hull has really been the difference maker for Indiana as far as elevating them to another tier, because they were searching for a couple of positions. Now they're only searching for one when it comes to the starting lineup. And Hull has provided that, like, glue as a defender, as a shooter, as a hustle player. She's a little undersized as a defender, but she makes up for that in effort. I think Erica Wheeler has actually done a nice job off the bench, spot minutes, spelling Clark. I feel good about her role in the possible playoff series. Beyond that, it's a crapshoot. They're going to need Fagbenle to finish around the basket, maybe hit a corner three, some jumpers here and there. They're going to need Dantas in specific situations. She's going to have some open threes that it's going to be important whether she knocks down, maybe even a post-up opportunity mismatch. But, both of those players are limited. Fagbenle is not a complete offensive player. Dantas doesn't really run the floor the way they need, and that's the position they could address in the offseason. But you don't have an offseason before the playoffs start. Beyond that, there's really not much depth either. When you go to the bench, you're not getting anything. Katie Lou Samuelson has been awful, to not mince words. She's been absolutely horrific. Beyond that, we know Christy Wallace doesn't even play anymore because she was so bad early in the season. So it's really a core group of players that is being over-relied upon, which makes it tough, especially against a team like Las Vegas, who has the experience, the championship experience, and the depth of personnel, where they've got Tiffany Hayes coming off the bench, 6th player of the year, in consideration. And then the Olympians, as we mentioned, obviously, an Olympian for Spain on top of all the Olympians they had for the U.S. So I actually don't think the Aces are ducking the Fever, but it will be interesting to see how the chips do fall and who the Fever do see in the postseason.